Back in the 20th century, a 16mm projector in the classroom meant a fun movie day instead of a boring teacher lecture. The films told students the correct way to do things. But what if the kids learned a different cinematic lesson? Were these health films educating students about good and bad behavior, or was it really teaching them a good way to be bad? Was there a dark and dangerous side to health films? I'm Randy Jones, the original cowboy from Village People, and I'd like to invite you to join me for Danger Health Films. Tonight we learned whether health films warned us about the dangers of teen drivers or gave us bad advice. Our first film is Alcohol is Dynamite, which was not a Good Times episode. Filmmaker Sid Davis wants to warn us about the dangers of booze. And like many of his films, this production was funded by that other iconic cowboy, John Wayne. So are Davis and the Duke really warning teens, or just giving mixed messages?
I guess you've seen that sign enough times, haven't you? Any bar or club that sells liquor by the drink or any retail store beverages is sure to have it in a prominent place. Bud and Jack went in to buy a case of beer for a picnic, and right now they think it's pretty unfair that they can't walk into a store like anyone else and buy liquor just because they're underage. Oh, that's me, incidentally, Tom Ullman. I'm a sports reporter on the city paper. The boys want me to take their money and buy their drinks for them. No deal.
The first lesson of this film is never ask the cranky old guy to buy your booze.
Maybe it'd be a good idea if I told them a little something about why that sign is in the window and why they should be glad it is there.
Now Bud and Jack will wish they had a beer.
Or anybody who fools around with this, adult or minor, is playing with dynamite.
As we know, teens never like to play with fireworks, explosives, or dynamite.
I decided to tell these boys about Paul, Jim, and Tip. I guess you could say Paul started it all, but it wasn't all his fault, actually. You see, he was just too good a musician for his age. He played in dance bands with older fellas, and they taught him things he'd be better off not knowing.
So Bud and Jack should have asked a musician to get him the good stuff.
Jim had the richest father in town, and Tip, well, Tip was captain of the basketball team, all-state the year before. They saw something funny in the way their friend Paul was acting as soon as he joined them. According to Paul, it's no fun drinking alone. He wants company.
And that's why they call it party liquor.
The other boys have never tasted liquor before, so they have to be dared into it. That first drink isn't very enjoyable, I can tell you. It burns your insides and it makes your eyes water.
Especially if you're stuck with the cheap hooch.
Tip refused the drink. He said he was in training and basketball meant too much to him. But that isn't good enough for his friends. He has to be a sport. You'd be surprised at how little it takes to get you tight that first time. That's true with adults, but at high school age, even though your mind seems mature, your body isn't, and alcohol is a violent narcotic. Well, that first night was the start. Paul, Jim, and Tip took to drinking together. Jim's father gave him plenty of money, and Jim kept them in liquor.
And there's another tip. If you want to drink booze, why not mix it with soda to get rid of the burning sensation?
The boys were drinking more and more, depending on liquor to get them through the day. Even dates were no fun anymore without a bottle. Jim's date, Judy, had never tasted liquor before, but like dope addicts, one drinker can't stand the sight of somebody not drinking. And soon, Judy catches the spirit of the thing.
Judy proves that mixers work.
The boys can't understand Judy. Only 2 drinks and look at her. But it's really very simple. Tolerance for alcohol varies from person to person. Judy is one of those on whom it acts like a deadly poison. someone who has never used it before, the effect is a lot more violent.
If only Jim had called a cab, he could have been busted for date rape.
Jim himself is in no shape to drive. Right now, he wishes he'd taken just one less drink. The result. Just another victim of a drunk driver. One of the estimated 10 to 20,000 last year alone.
So Judy was just too drunk to wake up and die.
Jim failed a few tests in high school after he started drinking, but he never failed a test as serious as this one.
This was the California cops' infamous limbo test.
Jim went to jail with plenty of time to think.
The most tragic Onion headline ever.
Jim never got over that accident. When he got out of jail, he went back to drinking and ended up on Skid Row, a hopeless derelict. So that's why you see that sign in the window, and that's why every boy and girl should be glad that somebody put it there. Because alcohol is dynamite.
Boom! Mind blown. What did Davis and the Duke teach us? If you're going to drink liquor, then you better mix it with cola. Kids didn't stop drinking and driving, so Davis and the Duke made the bottle and the throttle in color to be hip with the groovy 60s.
It can't happen to me. That's what you said, wasn't it, Bill? But it can and just did, and you're not quite sure why. Let's see if we can find out. Too many minutes ago, that young woman and her child were happy and healthy. Now their young bodies are crushed and racked with pain. Maybe they'll live and maybe they'll die. But one thing's sure, the next few minutes, hours, or maybe days, their lives will hang in the balance. And you'll have to live out those minutes, hours, and days knowing you were responsible.
The first responder seems to be in third gear when it comes to rescuing mother and child.
The police will measure out the skid marks, determine where you applied the brakes, give you a sobriety test, and it will all go into a report that will be reviewed in court. Maybe you'll be found guilty. Maybe you won't. But you'll never outlive the memory of waiting. Waiting to find out if the mother and daughter will live or die. Then the police are at you with questions. Where had you been? Had you been drinking? Would you submit to a sobriety test? Sure, why not? After all, you'd only had a few beers. You're not drunk. Of course you're not drunk. Not in the common sense of the word.
If Bill's not drunk, then we can turn on the lights and get ready for dodgeball.
Alcohol works as an anesthetic, and we adopt a I don't care or sure I can make it attitude. True enough, we're not drunk. At least not legally drunk. By that we mean our blood alcohol content is still below the 0.15% considered by law to be legally intoxicated.
So the good old days allowed us to hit the road with twice the legal limit and no seatbelts. How did we survive the 60s?
But those few beers we had can reduce our driving ability as much as 25 to 40%. The National Safety Council says that 2 normal cocktails or 4 beers can reduce visual acuity as much as wearing dark glasses at night. Now, only a fool would drive at night wearing dark glasses, but nobody thinks much about driving after 4 beers.
What if a student decides to practice drunk driving by putting on sunglasses and hitting the road? The Corey Hart method.
So if you must drive, don't drink. If you do drink and must drive, wait. Let the effects of the alcohol wear off. A good rule of thumb, wait 1 hour for each bottle of beer or each ounce of whiskey.
This plan falls apart when you cannot remember how much you drank.
We all find excuses for drinking. Bill's weren't so different from the rest. A need to belong, a desire to go along with a group, try something new. It may start innocently enough, a few beers with the gang. It is a social custom of our time. But today that social custom is invading our society at a younger age than ever before.
It's beach blanket beer go. Frankie and Annette, get plastered.
The few drinks that the social drinker may take don't seem to present a serious danger. But the trouble with drinking and driving is that it is always too late when the emergency arises and our reactions are too slow to avoid disaster. It is readily agreed by authorities and tests that driving skills are to a degree a matter of habit, built up over long periods of practice. It has also been proven that the latest driving skills mastered are the first to go when under the influence of liquor. Therefore, the older, more experienced driver is less likely to have his skills seriously impaired than the younger, less experienced driver.
Older drunk drivers are better than younger drunk drivers. This means that seniors are more qualified to get liquored up and get behind the wheel than sophomores.
One must be able to judge speed and distance, follow traffic patterns, make necessary adjustments, and be able to react quickly to emergencies. After a few drinks, the good driver is no longer capable of doing this. He has become a poor driver and is a danger to himself and others.
Now we know the rest of the story.
This happened to you, didn't it, Bill? Sure, you passed your sobriety test. It showed you had only 0.08% blood alcohol, about half the legal limit.
Or as we say in the future, a drunk driver.
They can't convict you on drunk driving, can they? But you'll always have to face the fact that those beach party beers were a contributing factor in your accident.
Now they've made the kids eager for the fun of beach party beers.
If you hadn't had them, you might have hit the brake pedal a second or two earlier. Those skid marks on the asphalt would have stopped on the right side, not the wrong side of that young woman and her daughter. The report just came through. The little girl died on the way to the hospital, and the mother will probably never walk again. No matter how your trial comes out, you'll always have to live with those facts, won't you, Bill? A child dead, a mother crippled. Not a pleasant future to face at the age of 18.
The bottle and the throttle proved that the 60s were the golden age of drunk driving. The streets must have flowed with beach party beer. Finally, 5 drunk drivers ponders if you can't stop drunk drivers, why not just put them to work?
My name is Tom Riley with Vermont's Project Crash. Crash is part of a federal program designed to rid our nation's highways of the drunk driver. And we'd like to share this spectacle with you.
Hey, over here!
Because if you're like most of us, you do drink and drive. Last summer, we selected volunteers from the audience here at Catamount Racetrack. Because we wanted to run it in front of 4,000 race fans on a Saturday night, we picked just 5 from the many who volunteered. This is the story of how those 5 people drove under the effects of alcohol.
This is already better than NASCAR.
The course begins with a series of sharp curves called the Serpentine. Traffic cones mark each side, and the course is especially tough because of the slant of the track. The cones are set 9 feet apart and allow only 1 foot of clearance on either side of the car. The winding Serpentine ends with a decreasing radius curve into a simulated garage on the infield. The driver must stop with his front bumper 1 foot from the cones at the end of the garage. Then, he must back out through the curve and stop in position to begin the high-speed lane change. It's possible to complete this much of the course in 45 seconds or less. Then, on a given signal, the driver rapidly accelerates to 30 miles an hour. When his bumper reaches the first set of cones, he's given a command on the track's loudspeaker system and by the flagman to go either left or right. He then must swerve into the proper lane without hitting any of the cones or large boxes marking the left and right traffic lanes.
I'm lost with these directions and I'm sober.
Practice is over. It's time to measure each person's driving ability in the dry runs before he becomes impaired by alcohol. Here's how the scoring works. A driver will lose 1 point for each cone or box knocked down. and 1 point for each second over the 45-second standard for completing the first part of the course. In the high-speed lane change, a driver will lose 5 points if he either hits his brakes or goes into the wrong lane.
Do you have your scorecards?
Now comes the fun part. Each driver had 3 dry runs, and an average score has been computed. The standings look like this.
Pick your favorites before they're pickled.
Each volunteer's alcohol intake is carefully measured and plotted, so that the first wet runs, just before race time, will be made with a blood alcohol concentration of about 0.05%, or about 1/2 of the state's legal limit of 0.10%. On the first wet run, Dave has about 4 drinks in his bloodstream, with a blood alcohol concentration of 0.06. Because Roger is pretty light, the 4 drinks in his bloodstream put him up to a BAC of 0.09, and his score jumps to a -26, compared to the dry score of -4. Frank, at 0.06, shows a slight loss of driving skill with a score of -6. Joe, with a BAC of 0.05, has exactly the same score as on his dry run, a -7. And Sue's score drops to a -28 with 3 drinks and a BAC of 0.06.
I had high hopes for Sue. So close.
Except for drivers show little loss of driving skills on the first wet run. They have BACs of about 0.05, the point where most normal social drinkers call it quits and stay out of trouble on the highway. After these runs, during the first series of races, the drinking begins in earnest, and the volunteers begin showing signs of alcohol impairment.
So join us for Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being an Earnest Drinker.
Man, the camera's right there. He's going around. I just, boom, right through it. I loved it.
Can I change my pick for favorite drunk driver?
I drove better, I think, on the wet runs, time-wise, going through the S's and...
Except that you knocked down more cones.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did. Your score was worse.
It was. Oh, well.
His next run is going to be legendary.
In addition to recording the number of drinks consumed, each participant's actual BAC is taken on a breathalyzer prior to the wet run. All tests are supervised by the state police. It's intermission. Just before the feature race of the evening, the stands are packed and our 5 drinking drivers take to the track. First we have Dave at 0.13 with 8 beers under his belt. On the other hand, Roger, another beer drinker, does a little better than he did on the first wet run when his BAC was 0.09.
This makes the sport of drunk driving unpredictable.
Frank, drinking Boilermakers, with a BAC of 0.13, scores a -19. Joe drives with the highest BAC of all at 0.14 and gets a -16. While Sue, on tequila, has the most colorful ride.
This film gives advice as to what you should drink before hitting the road.
Of course, there's always a morning after. But this one's a little different because we have newsreel footage of the night before. Most of our drivers still felt they performed rather well.
You can verify it.
I took the wrong.
Given home under similar alcohol drinking experiences, had you?
I don't know, probably. I think so.
Joe? I would have. You would have driven home.
Yeah.
They probably would have driven home with traffic cones.
Sue, Joe, Dave, Roger, Frank. Each of our 5 drinking drivers is an individual, quite a different person. But in one way, they're all alike.
When they get too much alcohol in their systems and get behind the wheel, they're dangerous. In fact, all of us who drink and drive are alike in this respect. Combine too many drinks with an automobile and we're a menace. On the track or on the road, few of us could have done any better than our 5 drinking drivers.
After watching 5 drunk drivers, are you ready to slam down shots and hit the track? Who needs the Indy 500 when the Rum 151 can be on TV? What do you think now? Did these hell films really warn about the dangers of drunk driving? Or did they educate students how to use mixers, enjoy beach beers, and view drunk driving as a spectator sport?